Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans represent an extremism that threatens the very foundations of our republic. It's dangerous. It's against the rule of law.
What's happened?
Chance has been elaborating on a plot by the Jedi to overthrow the Senate.
And now, America must choose to move forward or to move backwards, to build a future or obsess about the past, to be a nation of hope and unity and optimism, or a nation of fear, division, and of darkness.
So this is how liberty dies, with thunderous applause.
This is a story about a real person named Sarah. She thought she was living a better life with opioids. When she was pregnant with her fourth child, she started to use harder drugs. She wanted to be a good mom, but she didn't know how. Not giving up on the hope of recovery was the most important thing she could do. If you or someone you know needs to find care and treatment, dial 211. This ad is sponsored by the Florida Department of Health in Broward County through a CDC Financial Assistance Award in Broward County, Florida. Contents are those of the author and do not represent an endorsement.
Well, good morning, folks.
It was the most bizarre, dark, troublesome, nearly psychotic speech I have ever heard a president of the United States give. The president who once promised to unite us now wants to divide us. And how dare he make that vile speech on the steps of Independence Hall, the birthplace of America. The birthplace of America, where great men formed a government that would be the envy of the world, the place that first united us as Americans. How dare he make that vile? What happened to Joe Biden? He was good old Uncle Joe, who laughed and stumbled a bit, but we forgave him because he was good old Uncle Joe. And now this. Yeah, he was incompetent as good old Uncle Joe, but he was likable. Not anymore. He's become evil Dr. Jekyll. No, Dr. Jekyll was the good one. He's Mr. Hyde now. We missed that all along. And the setting, whoever staged this should be fired. Independence Hall was awash with dark red lights. This building that gave freedom and hope to countless millions was made to look ominous and threatening to match the angry theme of the evening. Again, how dare they? They have sullied sacred ground. Look, I grew up in Philadelphia and consider Independence Hall one of our most sacred national icons. I thought Joe Biden knew better. I was wrong. America met the other Joe Biden, the one he's been hiding from us to fool us and get elected. On the internet, they're calling him Dark Brandon. But with the dark red background and two Marines standing post to either side of him ominously, I was reminded of another dark leader. He is Darth Biden, trying to protect his empire from rebel forces who only want freedom from violent crime, want freedom from high inflation and overspending. By the way, is blood red the best color for the city of Philadelphia right now that has record crime and is set to break its homicide record this year, breaking the record set last year? Seriously, who thought this whole thing out? The tone of the entire speech was set with one stunning line right off the top.
Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans represent an extremism that threatens the very foundations of our republic.
And we're off. on this hell ride of a speech. President Biden has avoided saying the name Trump for the past 19 months, saying either the former guy or the past president. Not anymore. He said Donald Trump's name despairingly several times. Where's Will Smith when you need him? And then he continued on like that for another 20 minutes.
$300 overdose.
He claimed he knew what the MAGA crowd wanted. He claimed he knew what American people wanted. They want things like low inflation. They want things like safe streets, a closed border, and parental rights in schools. These demons, how could they want things like that?
MAGA
But now it all makes
Republicans
sense,
look at-
doesn't it? Think about it. He's going after... Go ahead. Let's hear that.
MAGA Republicans look at America and see carnage.
The January
and
6th
darkness and
committee
despair.
that will have its findings right before the... Really? Carnage, darkness, and despair? That's what they want? I don't think so. I don't think they want carnage and darkness and despair. I believe that's what they got. That's what they ended up with. But think about all of these things together, as I was saying a second ago. It all makes sense, right? The January 6th committee that will announce its findings right before the midterms. The raid on President Trump's home in Mar-a-Lago. And now this speech warning about Trump and the MAGA Republicans. That was all part of a Democratic midterm strategy. And by the way, the voting laws and the voting rights Biden was talking about last night, it's a ridiculous argument. This is a Democratic ploy. He speaks in large, dishonest euphemisms of protecting democracy. But what the Democrats really don't want in state after state is voter ID and signature verification. Voter ID and signature verification. You have to ask yourself why. And the only reasonable answer is that they want to cheat. They expose their own motives because most of the country is for that. That's why they can't come out and say, we're against voter ID, we're against signature verification, because most Americans think that's reasonable. The polls show that. The only reason not to verify that the person is who they claim to be is because you either want someone else to vote for them or you want to cheat somehow. That's the only reason. That's why they talk about racism and voting rights. No, that's the only thing they don't want. Voter ID and signature verification. And Darth Biden continues, and now he really gets using. He uses the word carnage and everything.
Republicans look at America and see
You don't hear the word
carnage
carnage too much in a
and despair.
presidential speech. Yeah, the only carnage I remember over the past 2 years was what happened in Afghanistan to 13 American service members. Biden made them sitting ducks with known enemies all around. He was warned that there might be an attack, but he closed Bagram Airport and wanted to force through this evacuation when everybody knew it was unsafe, when the Taliban had already taken over, although he claimed that was never going to happen. That's the carnage we should never forget. I don't know what carnage he's talking about. That's the only carnage I remember over the last few years. The only carnage that, well, there's the carnage on the streets of America, too. The president said several times that the Republicans want to take you backward. And that's true. They do. Republicans and the MAGA crowd want to take you backwards. Back a few years to low inflation, low crime, and low gas prices. That's what this speech was all about.
He's trying to distract from his disasters that he's created in this country. The problem with Joe Biden is he does not understand the soul of America. The tens of millions of hardworking, law-abiding citizens that he vilifies that simply want to have a say in their kids' education, to go to a school board meeting, want a gasoline price that they can afford, no longer wants inflation to continue to rise, afraid to go out in their streets to be safe again. They want a stronger, safer, more prosperous America, and all he does is vilify them to distract from the disasters and no plan he has to save America from where we are today.
That's it. It's a desperate distraction. Biden and the Democrats have nothing positive to run on. Nothing. I mean, they passed all those bills, but then they have to remind you that they spent $5 trillion, a record amount of money, in only 19 months. And when in politics you don't have a record to run on, you try and make your opponent worse, even scary. But the best reaction of the night came from Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee.
I think this is going to go down in history as the speech known as the "Get Off My Lawn" speech, because basically Joe Biden tonight was an angry old man yelling at the camera and yelling at 74 million Americans and saying that we don't love democracy, we don't love America, that we're not honorable people. And all I have to just say to you is just, that revs me up to want to go vote. Now, I'll be honest with you, I almost didn't make it on time tonight because after the speech, I had to go take a shower to get the spittle of Joe Biden off of me. I've never seen anything like it.
Yeah, I've never seen anything like it. I've never heard anything like it. It was unprecedented. It was a new low for American presidents. The speech was so dark, so out of bounds. I can't believe that anyone but the most partisan Democrats would take it seriously. And it may just have had the opposite effect, as Governor Huckabee said, and inspire Republicans to get out to the polls now. I for the life of me, I can't believe the ugly speech would be attractive to independents and will get them to now vote for Democrats. Here's the only thing that worries me about the speech, is that the mainstream media, the left media, Biden's media, that takes cues from the White House, will just take this and run with it, like they did after Biden started this dark path by calling Republicans semi-fascist earlier this week.
Finally calling out Republican semi-fascist behavior. Where has this version of Joe Biden been hiding all along? Was his semi-fascism label, in your opinion, unfounded?
Absolutely not.
The Republican Party of today, under Donald Trump, is a semi-fascist party.
President Biden did the right thing. He did the right thing by challenging them and calling them a MAGA fascist, semi-fascist mentality.
What do you think about the president calling millions of Americans semi-fascist?
Listen, he's got to express and be honest about what he feels in his heart and his soul.
And now he's out saying two things. One, lots of y'all are fascists. And, by the way, if you vote Republican, there's a decent chance that our democracy is no longer going to exist.
I got to tell you, Scott, a lot of folks would go, where's the lie? I don't see no lies detected.
Saying semi-fascist leads me only to the question, what's semi about that? It's full-on fascism.
Yeah, it's semi-fascist is like being semi-pregnant, you know? Either you are or you're not. I think he's worried about what he's saying. I think he's being told to say this. But we now know the campaign has officially started. The Democrats are off and running, and they're running on fear and loathing. And ironically, it's the Republicans that are running on hope and change. Hope for a better future. Hope for lower inflation. Hope for lower crime. hope for a closed border, positive changes. I can't believe this would work. Because what the Republicans are talking about and should continue talking about is exactly the opposite of what President Biden said. But in my heart, I believe most Americans heard his real message of darkness loud and clear. This is Larry Mendte in for the great Mark Simone on 710 WOR, the voice of New York. The number to call in is 1-800-321-0710, 1-800-321-0710. I would love to know what you thought about the speech last night. And when we come back, I'll share with you what President Trump thought about the speech last night on the voice of New York, 710 WOR. And welcome back to 710 WOR, the voice of New York. The number to call in is 1-800-321-0710, 1-800-321-0710. So we got a lot of reaction to the president's dark speech last night. Here's what Donald Trump said on social media. If you look at the words and meaning of the awkward and angry Biden speech tonight, he threatened America, including with the possible use of military force. He must be insane or suffering from late-stage dementia. I think he was told to do this to try to save the midterms, and he did it because he's weak. Let's hear what you have to say. 1-800-321-0710. John from Staten Island, you're on the Voice of New York, 710 WOR.
Hey, Larry, it's great to hear you. I wanted to express the outrage at what Biden said, because the ironic thing is that everything he accused Republicans of, they're guilty of. But that's a Karl Marx tactic. You know, he said, for instance, Republicans and MAGA people don't believe in the Constitution and don't respect the will of the people. These are the same people who've told us the Constitution is outdated. It was written by some dead old white guys and we should abolish it. But they love the Constitution when it suits their agenda. We don't respect the will of the people. Every time the people vote for something the Democrats don't want them to vote for, they run and find a liberal judge to overthrow the will of the people, like they did in California when Californians voted to get rid of welfare payments for illegal invaders. Remember that about 10 years ago? And then they constantly call Republicans a threat to our democracy, right?
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And thanks for bringing that up, John. That was exactly right. They were against the Constitution. They wanted to change it. They wanted to ignore the Constitution. They wanted to change laws so they could inflict more harm and have more power over the United States. Let's try to get quick to Rich in South Carolina. You're on the Voice of New York, 710 WOR.
Hey, thanks, Larry. You know, before I get to my point, Donald Trump always has a great way of succinctly putting something, and he's usually 99.9% of the time correct. This speech last night was nothing different than you would have heard from Mussolini or even dare say Adolf. It's about splitting the country in half. You don't believe what we want you to believe, then you're racist, you're Marxist, you're fascist, and it's all about splitting the country in half. Get them split in half, then cheat in the elections again, turn over a couple of purple states, and they hope to stay in power.
Yeah, excellent point again. It was surprising. It really shocked me, and I'm not shocked easily by politics. I think anything is possible, but I have never, ever heard anything like this. He took a specific shot. Took a specific shot at Lindsey Graham, and I want to talk more about that when we come back. But first, the news with Joe Bartlett. Hey, Joe.
Hello, Larry. Employers continue to hire at a solid pace, adding 315,000 jobs in August, but the number of unemployed Americans rose to 6 million. pushing the unemployment rate to 3.7%. 4 people dead, 8 injured after a passenger van overturned in Englewood Cliffs, New Jersey. Accident happened early this morning near exit 1 of the Palisades Parkway in the southbound lanes. No word on a cause. Federal judge expected to rule today on that battle between former President Trump and the Justice Department. Trump wants a special master appointed to review the materials the FBI took from Mar-a-Lago. And it's going to be a busy travel day as Americans get away for the Labor Day weekend. It comes as flyers have been experiencing a large number of delays and cancellations, so keep your fingers crossed. The news brought to you by The Truth with Lisa Booth podcast. Does it feel like liberty in America is slipping away as the government grows more and more powerful? Who better to turn to than Ron Paul for answers? Make sure to listen to The Truth with Lisa Booth podcast every Monday and Thursday and throughout the week on the iHeartRadio app or wherever you get your podcasts. Next update at 11. Breaking news at 1. Start your day with Len Berman and Michael Riedel in the morning, 6 to 10 Monday. I'm Joe Bartlett on 710 WOR.
Beautiful weather out there today. Mostly sunny skies. Temperatures this afternoon approaching 80 degrees for an afternoon high, right about where we should be this time of year. Mid-60s tonight. Clouds mixing in with the sunshine tomorrow, 82. Chance for a late day shower storm Sunday, mid-80s. Currently 68 at WOR.
The hypocrisy of the Democratic Party when it comes to political violence is deeper than the Mariana Trench. That's the deepest part of the ocean, by the way. You heard President Biden last night decry political violence and even allege that Republican politicians are calling for violence if President Trump is indicted. He's specifically talking about Senator Lindsey Graham. That's the only person I know that said anything remotely like that. Senator Lindsey Graham was on Fox News this past weekend. And he, I think, had a pretty reasonable response to the growing tension in this country over the double standard being displayed by the FBI, which is badly infected, as we found out, with a bias towards the Democratic Party. And that led to an unprecedented raid on the home of a former president.
I've never been more worried about the law and politics as I am right now. How can you tell a conservative Republican that the system works when it comes to...
This is a story about a real person named Sarah. She thought she was living a better life with opioids. When she was pregnant with her 4th child, she started to use harder drugs. She wanted to be a good mom, but she didn't know how. Not giving up on the hope of recovery was the most important thing she could do. If you or someone you know needs to find care and treatment, dial 211. This ad is sponsored by the Florida Department of Health in Broward County through a CDC Financial Assistance Award in Broward County, Florida. Contents are those of the author and do not represent an endorsement.
It's your right as an American to keep and bear arms, and Silencer Shop is the #1 source for firearm suppressors in the U.S. They're a Texas-based company, and dedication to customers like you are one of the reasons they have a Google rating of 4.9 out of 5 stars. The Silencer Shop kiosk makes the NFA process easy. Get your ATF E-Form 4 for your suppressor, SBR, or any NFA item easier and faster than ever. Check out YouTube and Instagram at Silencer Shop or visit silencershop.com. It's the easiest way to get a silencer.
Trump. Look at what happened with Crossfire Hurricane. It was a joke of an investigation. People lied and manipulated the evidence. Look what happened to Hunter Biden. They gave him a complete pass, apparently, and the social media outlets in this country suppressed information that could have mattered. And if they try to prosecute President Trump for mishandling classified information after Hillary Clinton set up a server in her basement, they literally will be riots in the street. I worry about our country.
I worry about our country, he said. That's how he ended that. I worry about our country. President Biden last night said that he encouraged violence. No, he was saying what we all know. That the country is so tense right now, so thick with political tension, that violence is a real possibility. If President Trump is indicted, arrested, of course there's going to be violence. I don't encourage it. I hope it doesn't happen. I hope I'm wrong. But everybody knows that's a distinct possibility. And if the Biden administration or police around the country aren't ready for that, well, then shame on them. They should be. Senator Graham was just stating the obvious. And he said, I'm worried about the country. He should be. He should be. A raid on a former president's house over presidential records that apparently wasn't a big deal a year ago. They had 19 months to take care of this, but they waited till right before the election? Really? Lindsey Graham made a perfectly reasonable statement. He said what everybody was thinking. And yet, as you heard President Biden, the left is going apoplectic, as if Graham just threatened to blow up the White House himself.
When you see people like Lindsey Graham who are essentially saying either allow this president to get away with wrongdoing or there will be more violence, that's a fascist statement.
All right, well, that is pretty far from the definition of fascism. But the Democratic Party is claiming everything the Republicans do is fascist. So that's the definition right now. That's their definition. That's Democratic Congressman David Cicilline following the president's lead and calling anything the Republicans do fascist or semi-fascist, which is a completely made-up term that makes no sense. You're going to hear that a lot in these midterms, along with the threat to democracy, which makes me sick because it's so absurd. The Democrats excel at these dishonest euphemisms, don't they? The Inflation Reduction Act that actually raises inflation, and Republicans and Donald Trump are a threat to democracy, although democracy has done fine for a long, long time when it's faced much worse. Here is former Congressman Joe Walsh, who left the Republican Party long ago, but CNN loves to put him on the air so they can put an R next to his name. And look, they can say, we have Republicans on the air. And Walsh will say anything CNN wants him to say because he needs the job and he needs some relevance. Here he is the day after Graham's comment.
To predict violence and or to warn about violence but not condemn it is terribly irresponsible and terribly dangerous. And Lindsey Graham knows that.
Yeah. He just said that Lindsey Graham predicted violence and that's dangerous, and then he said the exact same thing. Walsh said in his statement in his time on CNN that there will be violence. Should we blame him now? Or is he just stating the obvious? What a dope. Way to negate your own point. Look, there's so much hypocrisy here, I don't even know where to start. So let's start with Nancy Pelosi.
I just don't even know why there aren't uprisings all over the country, and maybe there will be.
You know, there needs to be unrest in the streets for as long as there's unrest in our lives.
Enemies of the state.
I'd like to punch him in the face. I said if we were in high school, I'd take him behind the gym and beat the hell out of him.
Show me where it says that protests are supposed to be polite and peaceful.
And if you see anybody from that cabinet in a restaurant, in a department store, at a gasoline station, you get out and you create a crowd. And you push back on them. And you tell them they're not welcome.
Shouldn't that be done by a commission or the city council, not a mob in the middle of the night throwing it into the harbor?
People will do what they do.
I have thought an awful lot about blowing up the White House.
Calls for violence against Donald Trump, members of his administration, and Republicans from Democrats in Hollywood, on TV news, and from Democratic politicians at the highest level. And then, of course, there are the 2020 riots after the murder of George Floyd by a Minneapolis police officer. The riots, which Democratic politicians kept insisting were mostly peaceful, caused $2 billion in damages, devastated businesses that closed for good, and it devastated cities across America. Portland, for instance, has never recovered. At least 25 people died in those riots. Countless were injured, including 2,000 police officers who were injured. And yet, Democratic politicians, like now Vice President Kamala Harris, just kept rooting for more.
This is a movement, I'm telling you. They're not going to stop. And everyone beware, because they're not going to stop. They're not going to stop before Election Day in November, and they're not going to stop after Election Day. And that should be, everyone should take note of that on both levels, that they're not going to let up, and they should not.
That was much worse than what Lindsey Graham said. Everybody beware. They're coming for you. Well, thank goodness they did stop. But that whole thing resulted in defunding the police departments that caused the retirement of a record number of police officers, attacks on police officers, and the inability to properly recruit police officers, which has led to record crime in American cities. That was irresponsible. Not what Senator Lindsey Graham said. And then there was the epidemic of attacks on Donald Trump supporters in cities across the country during the 2020 election. The Democratic leaders did nothing, said nothing, did nothing to stop it.
A terrifying night of violence as Donald Trump supporters were attacked by an angry mob waiting for them outside a Trump rally. It happened in San Jose. As the crowd headed home, they were set upon. One young woman tried to take them on, proudly showing off her Trump shirt.
She's egging them on. She's egging them on.
Then it turned scary. She's hit in the face with watermelon and raw eggs.
Oh my God!
She finds herself all alone and cornered. The crowd screaming obscenities, and no one came to her aid.
Are you feeling the hypocrisy yet? Are you getting how ridiculous what President Biden said last night, considering he's the leader of a party that's been the cause of all that violence and threatened more violence? Most recently, we had protests outside the homes of Supreme Court justices that are illegal because they technically are an attempt to influence a decision which is against federal law. But Democratic politicians had no problem with it.
These activists posted a map with the home addresses of the Supreme Court justices. Is that the kind of thing this president wants to help your side make their point?
Look, I think the president's view is that there's a lot of passion, a lot of fear, a lot of sadness from many, many people across this country about what they saw in that leaked document. We obviously want people's privacy to be respected. We want people to protest peacefully if they want to protest. That is certainly what the president's view would be.
So it's okay to protest outside the homes of Supreme Court justices. It's okay to break federal law, according to the White House, as they refuse to condemn the loud protest outside the justice's home that kept them up at night and frightened their children. This is so... Does anybody fall for this? It is so thick with hypocrisy when you look back at the recent history of the Democratic Party and violence. There's a word for this, by the way. It's called fascism. To attack another party but use violence to silence them and then attack them when they try to fight back. Look, if this makes Senator Lindsey Graham complicit in violence that may or may not happen, then Democrats must be liable for the violence of the past and the 2020 riots, the attack on Trump supporters, and the assassination attempt on the Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh. All things they're hoping you forget. This is a party, a modern Democratic Party, that arose from recent violence. They want to continue recent violence. And all Senator Lindsey Graham was saying, I hope we don't have more. Shame on President Biden for that speech last night. When we come back, there's a new warning out about booster shots. And it's a little frightening, especially when you hear who it's from. That's when the Mark Simone show continues on 710 WOR, the voice of New York. Larry Mendte filling in. If you want to comment on anything I just said, 1-800-321-0710. We're coming right back. So I know a lot of you are concerned about the vaccine. I get it. I understand that. But you do know that the first batch of vaccines, the first one you got and the second one you got, that was tested on hundreds of thousands of human beings before it hit market. Well, I got it. I got the first two shots. I didn't get boosted after that, but I got the first two shots. And I'm happy I did. I'm happy my family did. Now there's a booster coming out from Pfizer and Moderna that they're all excited about because it finally takes on Omicron. And Omicron is the prevalent variant right now, and it's inflicting a whole lot of people. But I listened to a guy named Dr. Paul Offit in Philadelphia Children's Hospital. Here's what he says about it.
It's not only that we don't have clinical data, seeing whether it works, which makes sense because, we're doing this on the fly. We don't have immune data in people.
Nearly two.
You hear that? No testing of people. Who did they test it on? Here's Dr. Offit again.
Right now, they're saying that we should trust mouse data, and I don't think that should ever be true. I don't think you should ever ask tens of millions of people to get a vaccine based on mouse data.
They tested it on mice. That's it. Beware of this new booster. It's never, ever been tested on human beings. That's from Paul Offit. He's an advisor at the CDC. When we come back, another health crisis, fentanyl. We'll talk more about that. Larry Mendte in for Mark Simone on 710 WOR, the voice of New York.
This is a story about a real person named Justin. He fell deep into the culture of drug users, and before he knew it, he was dealing with a serious opioid addiction. Using became his full-time job, a job where the work is pretty terrible. Recovery gave him the opportunity to be surrounded by people who truly love him. If you or someone you know needs to find care and treatment, dial 211. This ad is sponsored by the Florida Department of Health in Broward County through a CDC Financial Assistance Award in Broward County, Florida. Contents are those of the author and do not represent an endorsement.
You can add fentanyl to the crises this country is facing. A crime crisis with record murder rates in the cities across the country, an economic 40-year high in inflation and a looming recession, and a crisis at the border with a record number of people illegally crossing the southern border. And now, another record. 108,000 overdose deaths in 2021. 108,000. And we're on a pace to break that record again. We are at 92,000 deaths this year with still 4 months to go. The DEA reports that 70% of those deaths involve the illegal opioid fentanyl. It is now the leading cause of death for adults ages 18 to 45. And what are we doing about all of this? All these crises? In the last 2 weeks, President Biden passed a climate change bill and forgave student loans. The fentanyl crisis is just another crisis to ignore. Or at least ignore the cause of the problem. Everybody knows the source of the problem. It's the fact that we're not securing our southern border. And fentanyl, a synthetic opioid that is 10 times more deadly than a natural opioid, is pouring across into this country. Enough fentanyl has already come into the country to kill every American 7 times over, if that's possible. The DEA has been all over this. You can't blame them. They're all over this and begging for help. DEA Administrator Ann Milgram told CBS News' Savannah Guthrie exactly where this scourge on America is coming from.
China's to blame. Chinese chemical companies are the largest producer right now of the precursor chemicals that are being used to make fentanyl. There's a relationship between these Chinese chemical companies and the criminal cartels in Mexico. I think it's important to talk about the border, and I can say with 100% assurance that the criminal drug cartels in Mexico will stop at nothing to get fentanyl into the United States.
President Biden, listen to your own DEA administrator. If we secure the border, we can at least minimize the fentanyl coming into the U.S. And then we can work with the Mexican government to go after the cartels and destroy the fentanyl factories. But this president has said nothing, not one thing about the crisis until recently. Just this week, in fact, while campaigning for Pennsylvania Attorney General Josh Shapiro, who is running for governor.
And does something else really important. It addresses the opioid epidemic. Notice how many people are dying of opioid overdoses now? And by the way, laced with fentanyl? The Attorney General Shapiro can tell you more about that you never want to know for a fact. For real. He's been such a strong leader on this. But we're going to impose tougher penalties for deadly fentanyl trafficking. That's poisoning communities across this country. This is a key part of the unity agenda I'm announcing that I announced in my State of the Union address. We can do this. We have to do this. We'll make America safer.
Yeah, that'll do it. That'll do it. Tougher penalties. That's going to scare China and it'll scare the cartels, man. If you inflict some tougher penalties on fentanyl, they're going to be scared. He never once mentioned security at the border. Everybody knows that's the cause, that we have an open border. You simply cannot stop the fentanyl crisis without securing the border. Everything else is useless talk. He just wanted to check off a box. Oh, I talked about fentanyl. But the administration insists that the border is under control, the border is secure, and will not admit we have a crisis. How can you fix these problems if you won't even admit you have a problem? But you know who will admit to that? Border Patrol Chief Raul Ortiz, who had to admit it because he was under oath. The state of Florida is suing the administration for not securing the border. Listen to his deposition.
MAGA forces are determined.
We'll have the deposition in a second. But the deposition, he said under oath, they asked him, do we have a crisis at the border? And then you heard the Biden attorney in the background go, objection, objection. And he looked, here it is. You can hear for yourself.
Would you agree, Chief Ortiz, that the southern border is currently in crisis?
Objection. Yes.
Would you agree, Chief Ortiz, that unprecedented numbers of aliens are illegally entering the United States right now?
Objection. Yes.
Listen to your border chief, Mr. President. He's at the border you ignore. This is too important. This president who promised he would be straight with the American people has been ignoring this problem and lying to us about it since he was sworn into office, when he signed executive orders overturning Trump policies and causing this crisis. Only now is the White House even mentioning the problem, something that's killing our youth. And they claim they've been working on this all along. Why? Because we're less than 3 months away from the midterm elections, and they have to check off the boxes on all of the issues that are important to Americans. That's why. They've ignored it all this time, and now they're going, oh, no, this is important. People are dying from fentanyl. Here's White House spokesperson Karine Jean-Pierre being grilled by Fox News.
300 overdoses a day now. We know how the fentanyl is coming into the country. It's coming right across the southern border. The DEA administrator says so. So when is the president going to do something?
So I will say that you have seen a 200% increase of fentanyl seizures, which means that we are doing the job of catching drug traffickers. 200%, hold on, 200% increase, just
and
again,
Americans' life
seizures.
expectancies are going down at a rate not seen in a century, and part of that is being driven by drug overdoses. So what is the president going to do?
And we agree. We see those same numbers as well.
Oh, I'm glad you see the numbers. You want to do something about it? By the way, those arrests, the 200% increase in arrests, only means you have a bigger problem. Obviously, you stop some, but more that's getting through, just like the immigrants that are coming over illegally. You apprehend some, that means exponentially more are getting through. Show force, deploy the military, the National Guard. This is a crisis that needs immediate attention. There's so many people dying, so many kids dying. And the problem's been ignored for 18 months. Now we need something big, not talk, not legislation to increase penalties. The Attorney General in Florida, Ashley Moody, sent a letter to the White House urging President Biden to label illegal fentanyl as a weapon of mass destruction.
And it's time we really take drastic action. This isn't what we've seen in the past. This is something new. It's alarming. It's increasing exponentially, and it's time this administration takes it seriously and treats this as a chemical weapon that it is.
The Biden administration keeps saying their border policy is humane. Really? For who? A record number of immigrants have died either at the border or making their way to the border. Human trafficking is sky high, and now fentanyl coming across the border is killing a record number of people, over 100,000, over 200,000 since Biden was sworn into office. That's the opposite of humane. That's inhumane. I want to give you a couple of examples of how dangerous fentanyl is. Even law enforcement officers who just handle it are at risk. In San Diego, a deputy sheriff was processing some fentanyl after a seizure, and he almost died. What you'll hear is the deputy talking with a reporter intermixed with audio of a fellow officer giving him Narcan and trying to save his life on the scene.
My lungs just locked up. I couldn't breathe. I was trying to gasp for breath, but I couldn't breathe at all.
Bye-bye, you okay? Talk to me.
I'm sorry.
Oh, no. Don't be sorry. You're okay. Don't be sorry. There's nothing to be sorry about. I got you, okay? I'm not going to let you die.
Deputy Five Eye taken by ambulance, overdosing again and again on his way to the hospital. But without his partner and that Narcan, he knows he would have been just another statistic in this country's deadly drug overdose epidemic.
I'm Deputy David Five Eye, and I almost died of fentanyl overdose.
If you ingest or inhale just even a minute amount of fentanyl, it can be deadly. As a grieving parent, again, this from San Diego, found out.
He didn't sit down and take 10 pills before he went to school that day. He just took one.
In tears, Mom Laura Brinker-White describes how just one pill to treat anxiety laced with fentanyl took her 17-year-old son's life.
And he did not know that fentanyl was in that pill to the degree that it would kill him.
Yeah, this is an important warning right here. The young man got his anxiety drug over the internet. The DEA estimates that 40% of drugs obtained without a prescription over the internet are laced with fentanyl. 40%. And now the cartels are trying to lure a brand new audience, a brand new group of people into taking fentanyl. Young children.
At first glance, it may look like candy, or in this case, sidewalk chalk. Its forms may differ, but all fit the bill for rainbow fentanyl. It's the same highly toxic synthetic opioid, just a brightly colored version, and that's what's concerning for law enforcement.
My first thought was, why are they making these look like a bag of candy? This could be, trying to target younger users.
Over the weekend, U.S. Customs and Border Protection Port Director Michael Humphreys and his department seized more than 12,000 of these rainbow-colored tablets at the border near Nogales, Arizona.
Those tablets, those multicolored tablets that look like candy, have been found in New York and in New Jersey. They're all over the country. Are you angry yet? As this administration is welcoming a record 2 million immigrants who came here illegally. They're also making it possible for human trafficking, the cartels, terrorists, and fentanyl to enter this country at a record number. And what's worse is they know this but refuse to change policies because of politics. There must be a reckoning for this willful incompetence. Biden and the Democratic Party have failed to secure our border, which should be their number one job. Instead, they have spent $5 trillion on student loans, climate change, and billions in political gifts to Democratic donors, unions, and their pet causes. When it comes to fentanyl, this has been a deadly embarrassment and a deadly mistake. And it should be getting a whole lot more coverage than it's getting. But you can make it stop. Vote. Vote them out of office in November. Right now, that is the only weapon we have. That's the only way that things are going to change. And this has to change. It's that important. It should be one of the number one issues. The country just can't afford to keep making this deadly mistake. I'm Larry Mendte, in for Mark Simone on 710 WOR, the voice of New York. I'd love to hear from you about this. And I also want to point out the hypocrisy of Governor Kathy Hochul when we come back. 1-800-321-0710, 1-800-321-0710. We'll be right back. Texas Governor Greg Abbott is now sending buses to Chicago after sending them to New York and Washington. They're calling it a political stunt, the Democrats are. If it is, it's the greatest political stunt in history. It caused attention for a problem that needs attention in Texas. So good for Governor Abbott. In the meantime, New Yorkers are paying for this. How much? Well, we don't know exactly. But Governor Kathy Hochul recently told a TV news reporter that she's moving around funds to pay for all these immigrants coming to New York. Listen.
You should not be using human beings as political pawns.
In an exclusive interview to mark her first year in office, Governor Hochul told me she's been talking to federal Homeland Security officials to get money to assist Mayor Adams in finding food, shelter, and clothing for the migrants.
We actually found another pot of money that we think can be deployed to help the situation when they arrive. There is some federal money. There's another source of money that I've identified.
The governor says she's also working with the feds to help get the migrants jobs.
I put in a request for there to be some sort of possibly executive action that allows individuals who come here to have the ability to at least get a temporary work permit. And we have thousands of jobs here.
If you have a hard time getting a job, sorry about that. They're going to go to people that came here illegally. They can't help you. And all that money, that, by the way, is your money. That's now going to people who come here illegally because Governor Hochul is welcoming them with open arms. But if you're a Republican, well, here she is saying she wants you to get out.
And we're here to say that the era of Trump and Zeldin and Molinaro, just jump on a bus and head down to Florida where you belong, okay? Get out of town. Get out of town. Because you don't represent our values. You are not New Yorkers.
Apparently, the people that come here illegally from Venezuela and Cuba and Mexico and Guatemala, they're New Yorkers. But if you disagree with the governor, you're not a New Yorker, and they want you to leave. It is incredible, the thickness of hypocrisy. Do they realize what they're saying? Ralph from Manhattan, you're on The Voice of New York, 710 WOR. Hi, Ralph.
Larry, it's been quite some time. Good to talk to you. You know, I'll tell you about the president. I'm certainly no fan of the former president, you know, the one that causes all the trouble. But last night, this esoteric nonsense about saving the soul of the country has to have anybody with intelligence saying to themselves, let's get down to the bare bones. Let's take care of the matters at hand. Let's not get off in the clouds with this nonsensical talk that you tend to do when you need a few votes. You know, this guy is absolutely a divider. He's not a uniter. He never was a uniter. I'm not so sure he had that in his mind in the first place, other than to get elected. But as far as the governor goes in this state, when she talks about all these other ancillary matters and she ignores the crime that's actually, Larry, keeping people out of this city but in droves. She doesn't make mention of the fact that we're drowning here with a poor quality of life. I have to look at her and say she's just like the president. She gets off on tangents. She doesn't deal with the issues at hand.
Now, Ralph, as always, very well put, and as always, your voice intimidates me, but exactly, that is exactly correct. You are pushing people out who you want for your tax base in New York. You're pushing people out that will obey the law and pay their taxes, and you're accepting people into New York that you will then have to pay for. And by the way, this is across the Democratic Party. This is a new theme for the midterms. You're going to hear everybody saying that, not just Kathy Hochul, not just Joe Biden, but everybody running for office right now. They have nothing else to run on, so they need to scare you into not voting for someone else. And thanks for the call, Ralph, but there's a theme to what we're talking about today. And the theme is this is heading somewhere very dangerous. We'll talk more about that when I come back. But first, here's the news with Joe Bartlett. Joe.
All right, Larry, good morning. Employers continue to hire at a solid pace, adding 315,000 jobs in August. Number of unemployed Americans rose to 6 million, though. That pushed the unemployment rate to 3.7%. The market is higher on that news. The Dow's up 340 points at the moment. 4 people dead, 8 injured after a passenger van overturned in Englewood Cliffs, New Jersey. The accident happened early this morning near exit 1 of the Palisades Parkway in the southbound lanes. Federal judge expected to rule today on a battle between former President Trump and the Justice Department. Trump wants a special master to review materials that the FBI took from Mar-a-Lago. And it's a busy travel day as Americans get away for the Labor Day holiday weekend. Comes as flyers have experienced large numbers of delays and cancellations, so good luck with flights. Next update at noon, breaking news at 1. Start your day with Lynn Berman and Michael Riedel in the morning, 6 to 10 Monday. I'm Joe Bartlett on 710 WOR.
Beautiful weather out there today, mostly sunny skies. Temperatures this afternoon approaching 80 degrees for an afternoon high, right about where we should be this time of year. Mid-60s tonight, clouds mixing in with the sunshine. Tomorrow, 82. Chance for a late day shower storm Sunday, mid-80s. Currently 68 at WOR.
Wow, the New York Post has a stunning, I don't know if it's exclusive or not. It probably isn't, but it's still, I haven't seen this anywhere else. They have it first, at least. The property list of what was taken from Donald Trump's residence in Mar-a-Lago has been released by U.S. District Judge Aileen Cannon. And listen to this. Now, usually when you go in and search for something, the FBI has to be very specific of what they're looking for. And that's all they're supposed to take. Listen to this. 11,179 government documents and photographs were seized by federal agents on August 8th.
This is a story about a real person named Justin. He fell deep into the culture of drug users, and before he knew it, he was dealing with a serious opioid addiction. Using became his full-time job, a job where the work is pretty terrible. Recovery gave him the opportunity to be surrounded by people who truly love him. If you or someone you know needs to find care and treatment, dial 211. This ad is sponsored by the Florida Department of Health in Broward County through a CDC Financial Assistance Award in Broward County, Florida. Contents are those of the author and do not represent an endorsement.
The idea of owning a home felt like a pipe dream.
That's BECU member Leandra talking about her home buying experience.
So we went to BECU where I met our mortgage advisor, Lauren, and she was like, this is what we're going to do. This is how you buy a home.
As a not-for-profit credit union, BECU helps members find the right home loan to meet their needs. Learn more at becu.org/home loans. BECU, power in people. Equal housing opportunity lender. NMLS ID 4900518. Members were compensated for participation.
That bore no classification markings at all. In other words, they took everything they could find. There were 54 documents that were marked secret, 31 labeled confidential, and 18 that were labeled top secret that the president claims he declassified. We'll find out more about that, but that's less than 100 documents. 11,179 had no such classification. This was a hunting expedition. They wanted to see what they could find. This is a president searching the home of a former president from the opposition party, and worse, this is a Democratic candidate for re-election for president in 2024, searching the home for whatever he can find from the man who is supposed to be his Republican opposition, or at least is leading the field in being his Republican opposition. This is unbelievable. We were told, there was these secret documents, we had to get them. We're told in the redacted affidavit from the Biden Justice Department that it was urgent that the government retrieve top secret and classified documents from Donald Trump. It was a matter of national security. It was so urgent and so important that they had to raid former President Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago home over a year and a half after he left office. That just doesn't seem so urgent to me. It was a threat to national security that the FBI and the Justice Department is taking seriously. No, it was a threat to national security that the FBI and the Justice Department was so incompetent. If these really were damaging and threats to national security, why didn't they take it more seriously earlier? The whole thing just doesn't add up, does it? Or maybe they just wanted to wait until a couple of months before the midterm elections to try and make Trump the story and not the failures of the Biden administration. When you take that search into account and then a couple of weeks later that speech from last night, it all kind of seems like a campaign strategy, doesn't it? They needed Donald Trump as a political prop for Biden and the Democrats' new campaign theme that the ultra-MAGA movement is dangerous, even fascist or semi-fascist, and has to be stopped. The timing of all of this is more than a little suspect, isn't it? More than suspect, it's troubling. The FBI wouldn't allow Donald Trump's attorneys to watch the search. They wanted cameras turned off in Mar-a-Lago. Why? If this was a legitimate search and perfectly legal, why on earth did they have to hide it as they rifled through Melania Trump's closet looking for anything they could use? This is not normal. And this is over presidential records. Every former president has had a disagreement with the National Archives over presidential records. Some, like Nixon and Johnson, didn't turn over top secret documents for years, even decades. There was never a raid in all that time because they were former presidents. And now, after a secret, all-encompassing search where anything on paper seemingly was grabbed, we should check to see if the toilet paper's gone. If there was fish wrapped in paper in the kitchen, that was taken as possibly top secret. After that secret search, the Justice Department now is objecting to a special master to make certain that they can't continue going through all the papers in secret. They say, we already went through them. All 11,000? You already went through them? This all looks and smells so bad. You would think the FBI and the Justice Department would want the nation to see that this search was absolutely necessary for national security. In the court filing, the Justice Department is insisting that they had to take all of these documents to protect national security. That cries out for proof. Show us or explain to us how national security was threatened. Why you had to go in to a Republican former president and the top contender in 2024 during a political campaign for the midterm elections. Show us. They want us to trust what they're saying in the document. I guess they must believe they're trustworthy. Except they're not. And there's a wealth of evidence to that fact. Let's start with Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg's stunning admission to Joe Rogan that the FBI warned them that the Hunter Biden laptop story was Russian disinformation.
The FBI, I think, basically came to us, some folks on our team, and was like, hey, just so you know, like, you should be on high alert. We thought that there was a lot of Russian propaganda in the 2016 election. We have it on notice that basically there's about to be some kind of dump of that's similar to that. So just be vigilant.
Russia again. Don't they have anything else in their playbook? Facebook then suppressed the story. Twitter banned the story and suspended users who shared it. A story that turned out to be absolutely true. A story that polls show that if it were out, if people knew about it, Donald Trump would have won re-election in 2020. The FBI, not the Russians, were meddling in the election with misinformation. The FBI, not the Russians, were peddling information, and it worked. Peddling misinformation, and it worked. And we're supposed to trust them now? FBI agent Timothy Tebow, I'm sure football player Tim Tebow is going, why did he have to have the same name? Timothy Tebow was shown the door this week because he was hiding the Hunter Biden story from other FBI agents. They couldn't even look at the files. But he leaves with his pension intact, and I'm sure he'll end up on CNN now. Why wasn't he charged? Why don't they raid his home and see what he might have taken home? He's free now to get a job, like I said, at CNN or MSNBC, like the smug Peter Strzok, who bragged about interfering with the 2016 election. He bragged to Lisa Page, the Justice Department attorney he was having an affair with, that he would do anything to stop Trump from being president. Before being fired from the FBI, Strzok appeared before a House Oversight Committee and was grilled by Congressman Trey Gowdy.
You're investigating this alleged Russian collusion with the Trump campaign. You're the lead investigator. You originated the investigation. You're the point of contact. You drafted the document. And here you are before you've interviewed a single solitary witness saying F Trump. Then that same day, your colleague, Lisa Page, wrote, maybe you're meant to protect the country from that menace. And you responded, I can protect the country at many levels. We're not even a week into an investigation that you originated, approved, were the contact for. You hadn't interviewed a single solitary soul until August 11th, and you're already promising to protect the country from that menace, Donald Trump.
Strzok led the investigation into Trump. He oversaw the lying to the Pfizer to wiretap Trump's communications, and he pushed a fabricated Trump dossier paid for by the Clinton campaign as fact, the key part of the investigation. He lied to stop Trump. If they were lying then, what makes you trust that they're telling the truth now? James Comey, when he was head of the FBI, they lied to Trump's nominee for National Security Advisor, Michael Flynn. They didn't tell Flynn he was under investigation, didn't notify the White House that they wanted to interview Flynn. There was no attorneys present. Flynn trusted the FBI, and they ruined his life. And Comey admitted they acted inappropriately.
So if the FBI wanted to send agents into the White House itself to interview a senior official, you would work through the White House counsel, and there'd be discussions and approvals and who would be there. And I thought, it's early enough, let's just send a couple guys over. And so we placed a call to Flynn, said, hey, we're sending a couple guys over. Hope you'll talk to them. He said, sure. Nobody else was there. They interviewed him in a conference room at the White House Situation Room, and he lied to them.
No, you lied to Flynn. And the MSNBC crowd was sick at laughing at that. Biden talked about the Constitution so much last night. That's illegal. Merrick Garland put out a memo now saying that no FBI agents are to speak directly to Congress. Really? Again, they're hiding the truth. Why? I thought they loved whistleblowers. They loved the whistleblowers when one talked to Congress about a Donald Trump phone call. Just not now when a Democrat is in office. We need a special counsel for this Mar-a-Lago raid. Good luck getting one now. We are in the middle of a bloodlust campaign to stop Donald Trump and influence elections. We need to clean out the FBI and the Justice Department of those who can't put aside their deep political prejudice to do their jobs objectively. We are supposed to be protected by our Constitution from harassment by police or the government, from unfair search and seizure. Citizens' rights in this country are supposed to be at the center of our democracy, a government for the people. We are losing that to a political philosophy that if you don't bow to that philosophy, there must be something wrong with you, and thus you must be investigated and ultimately punished. That's what President Biden was speaking about last night when he damned half the country for not following his lead. We are getting close to a police state, my friends. It's scary. When we come back, a pretty amazing impersonation of Donald Trump. This is Larry Mendte in for the great Mark Simone on 710 WOR, the voice of New York. So actor Jamie Foxx, great actor, was on a podcast to promote his new film, Day Shift, with Snoop Dogg. And, you know, he used to be a comedian and impersonator. He unleashed the best Donald Trump impersonation ever. Here it is.
There's a lot of great people on both sides. Lots of great people on both sides. I know Harry O. He's a great person. He couldn't vote for me at the time. Now he can vote for me once he gets out. I love Snoop D.L. Double G. Great person.
So do you love Death Row Records?
I love
People
Death Row. I love Death. Excuse me. Fake news. I love Death Row.
What's your favorite Death Row record, Mr. Trump?
All of them. All of the Death Row records. Don't try to pin me down. I see what he just did.
So actor Jamie Foxx, great actor, was on a podcast to promote his new film, Day Shift, with Snoop Dogg. And, you know, he used to be a comedian and impersonator. He unleashed the best Donald Trump impersonation ever. Here it is.
There's a lot of great people on both sides. Lots of great people on both sides. I know Harry O. He's a great person. He couldn't vote for me at the time. Now he can vote for me once he gets out. I love Snoop D.L. Double G. Great person.
So do you love Death Row Records?
I love
People
Death
on both
Row.
sides.
I love Death. Excuse me. Fake news. I love Death Row.
What's your favorite Death Row record, Mr. Trump?
All of them. All of the Death Row records. Don't try to pin me down. I see what he just...
This is a story about a real person named Sarah. She thought she was living a better life with opioids. When she was pregnant with her fourth child, she started to use harder drugs. She wanted to be a good mom, but she didn't know how. Not giving up on the hope of recovery was the most important thing she could do. If you or someone you know needs to find care and treatment, dial 211. This ad is sponsored by the Florida Department of Health in Broward County through a CDC Financial Assistance Award in Broward County, Florida. Contents are those of the author and do not represent an endorsement.